Have you ever heard the term reactive abuse? Today, I'm going to bring to you a smorgasbord of questions from listeners about reactive abuse, how to identify covert abuse, how to know when you're in an abusive relationship as soon as possible so you don't waste your time, and so on. Annette Altman from the Mend Project said, I don't like the term reactive abuse because there's plenty of data out there to show that there are not two victims and two abusers. So I like to call this reactive defense, but it's not the proper term that's being circulated in professional circles. And in fact, in professional circles, most of them don't even know about the term reactive abuse. So they are still viewing the couple as two abusers and two victims. Reactive abuse is, I just want to emphasize that it's an involuntary reaction of self-defense that the victim in an abusive relationship displays, stemming from their trauma. And I'm sure so many of your listeners have been in these, what I call prolonged states of stressful confusion, or what are known as trauma states, because they haven't been able to yet identify that what they're experiencing is in fact abuse. And they aren't yet ready or understanding that they are a victim of abuse. Everything you need to know about reactive abuse is going to be in episode 214. All right, we're going to get to our list of questions for today. And each one is slightly different, but they're also somewhat similar because each one basically asks a question that deals with a different facet of covert abuse. So the first question was, how do you determine whether your husband is emotionally abusive or just doesn't understand what it takes to be a husband in a marriage? So here's my thoughts on that. Everyone, when they first get married, is ignorant about what it takes to be a husband or a wife in a marriage, largely because they've never done it before, right? A healthy individual is going to learn what it takes in a variety of ways. One way is by being a good listener and tuning in to their partner's voice. So, for example, when a wife expresses gratefulness or delight, he will learn what pleases her or what brings her joy. When she expresses pain or discomfort or offers feedback like, that really hurt me, he will learn what hurts her or what he needs to adjust in his behavior or his thinking, and vice versa for the wife to the husband, right? Obviously, it should go without saying that in a healthy marriage relationship, this goes both ways. Another way a healthy man will learn how to be a good husband is by hanging out with other healthy men of different ages who are good examples for him. Another way might be reading good books on the subject. If he is struggling with maybe some past trauma from his childhood, a healthy man will go to therapy to unravel that trauma so that it doesn't interfere and end up harming his intimate relationships with his wife and his children. Now, I'm guessing the person who is asking this question is not just 3 months into her marriage with a man who's green behind the ears and learning what it means to love, respect, and hold space for another human being. Good men make good husbands and fathers, and employers, and employees, and neighbors, and friends, period. Good men are kind. They are respectful. Good men care about the thoughts, opinions, and feelings of the people around them. Good men don't have to control everyone like they're playing chess in order to feel joy in life. So if your man is unkind, dishonoring, disrespectful, manipulative, blaming, shaming, unable to take personal responsibility for his behavior, or he uses you, mistreats you, ignores you, scoffs at you, gives you the silent treatment, and so on, then he is not an emotionally healthy man. And he will not be able to show up in his intimate relationship with you in a way that deepens that relationship and offers safety and joy. Now, he might be able to pretend to be a good man sometimes, but pretending is very different from actually just being a good man, right? If you are asking, Is my husband emotionally abusive or is he just ignorant? Here's another way you'll know. Simply call him out on his behavior. And if he denies it, justifies it, minimizes it, or blames you for it, then he is an emotional abuser. If he's just ignorant, he will say, "Thank you for that feedback," and he will be a better man next time. All right, the second question that came in asked this: when does abuse become abuse? I know that abusive behavior needs to be repetitive, or it needs to happen more times for it to be called abusive behavior. We would call that a pattern. But where is that line where it just crosses over to being abuse? All right, my take on that is that abuse is abuse, even if it only happens once. So the very first time that someone gaslights you with the purposeful intent to serve their own agenda or control you or make you show up in a certain way, they have abused you. The very first time that they withhold information from you with the intent to manipulate you or mislead you, they have abused you. The very first time that they tell you that you're stupid with the intent to shut you down, they have abused you. The very first time that they give you the silent treatment in order to force you to do whatever it is that they want you to do, they have abused you. Now, you may not recognize the abuse for several days, weeks, months, or even years. Maybe you grew up being treated like that. So you might think, well, this is normal. This is how people treat me. Maybe I deserve it. That's how often our nervous systems just get used to it because we grew up with that. You might even think that cruel feedback from your partner is a form of love because that's the water that you swam in your whole life. And the people in that water always said they loved you. So how do you know any different? You could be married to an abuser who only abuses you in ways that you can recognize once a year. I remember watching the show Big Little Lies. And in that show, Nicole Kidman plays the role of a domestic violence victim who's married to a wealthy man, and they have twin boys. And he is an amazing husband and father most of the time. But once in a while, he flips the switch and beats her. And she hits him back. So she believes it's just a marriage thing and that they're both abusive sometimes. This series shows how she goes to therapy and she just cannot see that she is in an abusive relationship. And even us as the viewers, we're tempted to think, well, the relationship is mostly fine. And he is a very loving, attentive, and caring man the rest of the time. And there seem to be reasons why he flips the switch. And maybe we should just give him chances and just give him a pass. But the fact is, abuse is abuse. And nobody should treat another person that way. Not even once. Now, I realize that show depicts physical violence, and we would call the stuff that she did back to him as reactive defense, okay? Like we talked about at the beginning of the video. But we are dealing with psychological violence here in this video. Nevertheless, it is violence against the personhood of another human being. I think it's really important for us to get that clear. In our churches and religious communities, they will often deny that emotional abuse or spiritual abuse is actually a destructive form of abuse. But the rest of the world understands, and the research bears out and shows that emotional abuse is actually just as destructive as physical abuse. And everyone who's being physically abused is also being emotionally abused. And they're going to therapy many, many years later, not to heal from their physical wounds, those healed a long time ago, but to heal from the emotional wounds on their psyche that they have to deal with now for the rest of their lives. All right. So it is a very, very serious kind of abuse. My ex's response was always some version of, I said I was going to do it, didn't I? I mean, why do you have to nag me about everything? No matter what I do, it's never enough. Or you do the same thing, so why are you harping on me again? I see women asking these kinds of questions because they're looking for a loophole that will make their reality untrue. Like they don't want to be in an abusive relationship. I remember the first time I was watching a video late at night and it hit me. Or actually, no, I was reading a book. I was reading a book and it hit me. Oh my word. This is describing my marriage. Really? Am I really in an abusive marriage? I would never have used that term. I knew my marriage was extremely problematic, but abusive? I didn't want to believe that at first. It was very hard for me to wrap my brain around that. So I'm looking for loopholes to make that not true. But I have never had any of my friends who are in healthy relationships ever ask me, Natalie, how do I know that he's emotionally abusive and not just ignorant? Or when do I decide if my husband has harmed me enough for me to be able to call it abuse? None of my friends in healthy relationships have ever asked me that. That question has never even crossed their minds because there's no abuse going on. It's not even on their radar. Do you see this? If you're asking these kinds of questions, your relationship is most likely abusive. And armed with that understanding, you can now learn how to deal with your reality instead of living in denial or pretending that it's not real or that it's not happening. All right, the third question was this. I've been married for 15 years, and the first 5 years were really bad, but the last 10 years have not been as bad. And so, especially in the last few years, I've been doing some healing work and I've noticed a big difference. So, I guess my question is, he's not doing the things he used to do, like in the first 5 years. I'm not being controlled. I'm not being kept from my family. I'm not being blatantly told things like my happiness doesn't matter. There's nothing that's really in my face. I'm not being controlled or anything like that. I guess you could say it's more covert. So, like manipulation, demeaning, berating me, degrading me, blame shifting. And he has this inability to take ownership or to apologize or take accountability for anything. And he manipulates things and twists things, like says everything that's my fault. And that's what I'm dealing with, but it's not like before. So I don't know if that's still considered abuse. It feels like something that I should be patient with because now he's also telling me that he needs me to keep pointing it out to him. Right? So I read this question and I was just like, oh my gosh, this kind of abuse that he's doing is called covert abuse. And this is exactly what I lived with myself for 25 years. And that's really what my podcast, Flying Free, is all about. Yes, yes, yes. This is abuse. I recommend my book, Is It Me? Making Sense of Your a Confusing Marriage, a Christian Woman's Guide to Hidden Emotional and Spiritual Abuse. You can get it on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and Audible formats. What abusers will do is switch masks. So maybe at the beginning of your marriage, he was more blatantly abusive, and maybe he realized he couldn't get away with that anymore. Maybe, I don't know what happened. Maybe you threatened to leave him. Maybe you threatened to pull the plug in some way. So he put on a new mask, the covert abuse mask. And if he sees that he can fool you with this kind of abuse, and it sounds like he is able to do that, then what's he going to do? He'll just continue doing more of that. I see women all the time learning about a covert abuse, though. I'm going to take this a step further. They'll learn about covert abuse, and then they'll threaten to leave. And then their abuser will put on a repentant mask, and he'll be super nice and appear to have changed and repented and turned over a new leaf. And the Holy Spirit has changed him now. But all of this is just, he's just trying on different masks to see which one is going to work with you now. Which one is going to fool you in order to make you do what he wants you to do? And I'm sorry, but that is the quintessential essence of control. I know this listener asked, said, well, he doesn't control me anymore, but he's doing all of those things, manipulating, berating, degrading, all those things. Oh my word. Yes, he is. He is 100% controlling you. He is controlling that whole relationship with all of those behaviors because now that stuff works for him. Okay. And this is what I help women with. I help them unhook from that stuff so that they become what I call slippery. They're slippery. No longer can their abuser hang on to them and throttle them because they slip out. They're unhooked. They're like the fish that got away. All right. So when none of the masks work, that though is when they get really nasty. So they drop the mask efforts, and that's when you see the full monster face of the person that you married. And yeah, it's scary. We don't want to see that. That's why we're careful and we're scared to confront them or give them feedback. So they are controlling our responses by either using love bombing or being super nice or manipulating us or guilt tripping us or blame shifting or maybe subtle digs into our character to try to make us feel bad and so on. Plus, their masks are really effective at fooling everybody else. So even when you begin to see, oh yeah, he's just trying on a new mask, I mean, my heart goes out to you because everyone around you is still fooled by his mask game. All right. And then you know what happens? We end up looking like we are the crazy, unforgiving, willfully blind, bitter, angry Christian wife. And that's really hard to deal with as well. So if you're wondering if his better behavior is abusive, yes, it is 100% abusive. And I would not call this behavior better. I would actually call it worse because it's trickier. It hides behind something we call better. You mentioned twice that he's no longer controlling you, but if he is covertly abusing you, then he is totally controlling you. And he's using covert abuse to do it. You said that he manipulates you. Well, manipulation is just another word for controlling someone. I encourage you to make a list of all the things that you can't do or say around him for fear of repercussions, just to see exactly how he's controlling you. Are you free to give him feedback without getting blamed or shamed? Well, then he's controlling whether or not you give him feedback. Do you have just as much control and say over the finances as he does? I mean, maybe you do, but think of things where you don't have just as much control and say over. Do you get to make all of your decisions together? When you have a conflict, are you always able to come to a mutually agreeable understanding and bring closure to that leaves you both feeling seen and heard? If you're truly free, you should be able to act and do and say absolutely anything. And you know that you're safe and he loves you and supports you. You're in a safe marriage. You could be whoever you are. That's what it means to be who God created us to be. And that's what it means to be in a relationship that is safe and healthy. Think about like your best friend from high school or college where you felt so safe and you could be yourself and you never had to worry about anything. Was your best friend trying to control you with tactics? Probably not. That's why they're your best friend, right? You can be safe to be who you are. But if you can't be like that around him, then there's something wrong. Are you free to give him feedback and know that you're not going to get blamed and shamed for it? No. So read my book. I think it's going to help you see the ways that you are being abused. And again, you can get that on Amazon. It's called Is It Me by Natalie Hoffman. All right. The last question is this. For about the last 10 years, my husband has slept in the guest bedroom. It was his decision, not mine. And it's not like we had a fight and he decided to go in there. He just came home from a business trip one day and my daughter had fallen asleep with me in my bed because we had always laid down with her until she fell asleep and her mattress hurt my back. So she slept in our bed while he was out of town. And he decided to go into her room and he's never come back to sleep in our bed. There's also been an issue of pornography that has affected me. It felt like betrayal and I've just had a hard time getting over it. So I guess my question is this abuse? I'm very depressed and sad, and I'm feeling like I want to move on. And he actually talked about divorce last year. And now that I've come around to talking to him about it, suddenly he's ignoring me. Like he's acting like I never said anything. It's just really confusing. So anyway, if you could give me any advice, I would appreciate it. All right. So I'm just going to be able to go off of what she wrote here and not knowing anything else about the relationship. I would call this emotional abandonment. This is the emotional abandonment of no longer sleeping with this person. And by the way, I don't want anyone to confuse this with what victims will do sometimes when they set boundaries of protection for themselves when they're married to someone who is either sexually raping them or abusing them in other ways. And they have decided that they are no longer safe to offer themselves sexually to their abuser. All right. And I know women they do what's called an in-house separation and they move to a different room and it's not the same thing. They are moving to protect themselves from their abuser. Very different from an abuser just abandoning his relationship because he just is checking out for whatever reason. All right. So don't think, oh no, I did that. Did I emotionally abandon my husband? No, it's not the same thing. But in this case, the husband has emotionally abandoned his wife. And then he's turned to porn, which is emotional and sexual betrayal. And then he's talked about divorce without following through, which is very threatening and frightening. And all of this is, yes, abusive. Sometimes we can't see it for ourselves. So I will often suggest to a victim that she imagine that her daughter is an adult, married to the same type of guy and going through the same types of things. What would we believe about her situation? Would we say, well, you made your bed, now you got to lie in it? We will often be unloving and unkind to ourselves because we have a low view of ourselves. Maybe we were programmed to think we don't deserve good things, but we might not ever think that about our precious child. And the irony is that you are a precious child too. And we are the only precious child that we must take responsibility for the entire duration of our life here on earth. But let's just say for a minute that he's not abusive, because there might be people listening to this who would say, no, that's not abusive. That's just negligent. And that's not the same thing as abuse. Okay, let's go there and just say they're right. But even then, is this a Christian marriage? I mean, is this Christ-like? Does this bring glory to God? I'm using spiritual language here for the sake of those who think in these terms and defend Christian marriage. You're not really defending Christian marriage at all when you say that a marriage like the one described here is a Christian marriage and should be left intact. No, this is not a Christian marriage, nor is it an example of one. Now, you might be a Christian woman setting a Christ-like example within your marriage, but the marriage itself is not a Christian marriage. Does that make sense? So, and you get to decide. And guess what? You don't need anyone's permission to decide this, whether or not this is the kind of marriage that you want to be part of. And for anyone thinking, well, now, wait a minute, she needs to ask God's permission, I will just say she already has God's permission and even his mandate to take the one life that God has given specifically to her to steward and to make her own choices about how to steward it. There's parables that talk about this, you guys. And I've talked about this many times on the podcast and in the Flying Free program. God promises to never leave us or forsake us. Do we believe that? Or do we say, well, but he might actually, though, if I leave my abusive husband, then God might leave me as well. Well, what kind of God do you worship? I wrote another book. It's a memoir called All the Scary Little Gods, that basically it's my spiritual memoir. It's how I grew up and how I ended up starting to question the God that I was programmed to believe in, which was a very scary little God. And then how I discovered a God who is not scary, a God who is so much more powerful, and a God who is true to his words and not to the ideas of men. So God's promises are not conditioned on whether or not we stay in an abusive, negligent, emotionally destructive marriage. God is a lot bigger than some of our petty little ideas about this. She said she's depressed and miserable and has been for many years. I just want to ask this. Is that how we change the world? By masochism? By purposefully putting ourselves in situations where we are being mistreated, where we are falling into depression, where we are dealing with trauma day after day after day? I don't think so. I think we change the world by first starting with ourselves. And if we are in an environment that is making us sick in our heart and in our head and in our body, then we are not going to be able to live our lives to their fullest potential. And we only get one. We only get one shot at this. And nor are we able to offer an example to our children or to others for how to do this. I just want to close by sharing a recent review of the Flying Free Kaleidoscope, which is my program for Christian women. I keep it at the rock bottom price of less than $1 a day for full access to an extensive 8-year library of classes, workshops, Q&A sessions, coaching. Plus you'll get a private forum. You'll get access. You can ask me a question every single day of the week if you want to. and tag me and I will come in and answer you. Those are the people that I work with. And there are hundreds and hundreds of women in that program. You could join us. All right, here's one review that recently came in. Last night, while I couldn't sleep, I was thinking about the last 15 years of my life in this crappy marriage with a strong desire to leave, but never feeling like that was an option, but always fantasizing of how to leave. After reflecting on the last 15 years, I realized that I made a couple of attempts to get out in those 15 years, which I ended up right back where I was. Fast forward to today, and I have never felt more empowered and confident and assured of my decision. I have moments of second guessing, but my brain pulls up lots of evidence. And that is because I found you and your program. I have spent the last year working this program and consuming all of the information and every yummy morsel you have put out there for us. I cannot thank you enough for creating this space and giving us access to so much information and tools and walking alongside us in the mud of it all. When I first started, I remember you saying, and I've heard you say it many times since, if you do the work in the program, I promise you, you won't be the same in a year. Admittedly, I kind of doubted those words because I was living without hope. But today, I can say that you are 100% right. I hope you'll go over to joinflyingfree.com to get more information about it and complete an application. And again, join hundreds of Christian women just like you who are learning to manage their own thoughts, emotions, and behaviors so they can steward their one precious life well, regardless of who they're married to and what he is doing. Until next time, fly free.